Welcome to Creep to Sleep. Tonight's story follows a house sitter who took one simple job. Watch the place, feed the cat, and whatever you do, don't sleep in the master bedroom. But of course, he did. Plug in your headphones, hit subscribe, and drift into the dark. The ad too good to be true. Liam scrolled, his thumb aching. Dog walking, tutoring, data entry, minimum wage, intern, unpaid. He shoved a handful of stale tortilla chips into his mouth. Rent was due next week, and his savings account resembled a barren wasteland. He refreshed the job board, a familiar wave of hopelessness washing over him. Then an ad caught his eye. Estate caretaker, Blackwood Manor. The pay was absurd. 3 times what he made at the campus bookstore for what seemed like minimal effort. He clicked. The description was brief, almost suspiciously so. Seeking responsible individual to oversee Blackwood Manor for a period of 3 weeks. Duties include light maintenance, security checks, and plant watering. Generous compensation provided. Must be available immediately. Contact Mr. Albright. Blackwood Manor. The name rang a faint bell. He vaguely remembered hearing whispers about the place. A sprawling mansion nestled deep in the hills outside of town, abandoned for decades. Local legend painted it as haunted, a place of shadows and sorrow. Liam usually dismissed such stories, but a shiver still ran down his spine. He Googled it. Images popped up. Imposing stone walls, overgrown gardens, windows like vacant eyes staring out from the darkness. The last news article he found mentioned a string of failed attempts to sell the property, citing its problematic history and unsettling atmosphere. He almost closed the tab. This was ridiculous. Too good to be true always was. But the rent loomed large in his mind, a monstrous debt collector whispering promises of eviction and ramen noodles. He told himself he was being practical, logical. The house probably just needed someone to keep squatters out and the pipes from freezing. He'd be doing them a favor, really. He drafted an email to Mr. Albright, highlighting his extensive experience in home maintenance. He'd once unclogged a toilet, and his unwavering commitment to property security. Maybe it was a prank by some frat bros. Or worse, a legitimate scam. But the desperation won out. He needed the money. That night, sleep evaded him. He tossed and turned, haunted by images of crumbling gargoyles and whispering trees. Every creak of his apartment building sounded like footsteps in the dark. The next morning, he drove out to Blackwood Manor, the landscape growing increasingly desolate as he climbed into the hills. The air felt colder, heavier, as if the very atmosphere was pressing down on him. Finally, he reached the gates. Tall, wrought-iron monstrosities, adorned with rusted spikes and twisted figures. They were locked, but a small, weathered sign instructed him to call a number. He dialed. The phone rang twice before a gravelly voice answered. Albright. Mr. Albright, it's Liam O'Connell. I'm here at the gates. Enter. With a groan, the gates swung inward, revealing a long, winding driveway leading up to the imposing silhouette of Blackwood Manor. Liam took a deep breath, put the car in gear, and drove into the darkness. He pushed down the anxiety creeping up his throat, telling himself it would all be fine. He just needed to make some money. This was just a job. What could possibly go wrong? Arrival at Blackwood Manor. The drive felt endless. Liam watched the city shrink in his rearview mirror, replaced by sprawling farmland that eventually gave way to dense, gnarled forests. His old Civic, affectionately nicknamed the Rust Bucket, sputtered and coughed its way up winding roads, each turn taking him further from civilization and deeper into a growing sense of isolation. Cell service became a distant memory. Hours blurred. The sun began its slow descent, painting the sky in hues of orange and bruised purple. Just as Liam was starting to question his sanity and the reliability of his car, he saw it, a silhouette against the fiery sky. Blackwood Manor. Even from this distance it was imposing. A Gothic monstrosity of dark stone and sharp angles, perched precariously on a hill overlooking a valley. It looked less like a home and more like a fortress, daring anyone to approach. A shiver snaked down Liam's spine, a mixture of excitement and a prickling unease. He pressed on, the road narrowing into a barely maintained lane choked with overgrown bushes. The air grew cooler, carrying the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves. Finally he reached the gates, wrought iron black as night and easily 10 feet tall. They were adorned with intricate carvings of ravens, their beady eyes seeming to follow him as he pulled up. The gates were slightly ajar, just enough for the Rust Bucket to squeeze through. He killed the engine, the sudden silence amplifying the sounds of the surrounding forest. Crickets chirped, and an owl hooted in the distance. He took a deep breath, the air heavy in his lungs. Getting out of the car, his shoes crunched on gravel. The manor loomed before him, even more massive up close. Its windows were dark and empty, like vacant eyes staring into his soul. Ivy crawled up its walls, a suffocating embrace that seemed to be slowly consuming the stone. Liam reached into the back seat, grabbing his duffel bag and a small box of instant noodles, his culinary lifeline. As he turned towards the manor, he noticed a small, weather-beaten sign next to the gates. It read, "Blackwood Estate, private property, no trespassing." The Blackwoods warning. The door creaked inward, revealing not the dusty emptiness Liam expected, but 2 figures bathed in the dim light of the entryway, an elderly couple. The woman, Agnes, was thin and pale, her gray hair pulled back in a severe bun. She clutched a shawl tightly around her shoulders, despite the stuffy air inside. Beside her stood Arthur, a man built like an oak, his face a road map of wrinkles etched deep by time and worry. His eyes, though, were sharp, assessing Liam with an intensity that made him want to squirm. "You must be Liam," Arthur rumbled, his voice a low growl. He offered a hand, calloused and strong, and Liam felt a surprising jolt as they shook. "I'm Arthur Blackwood, and this is my wife, Agnes." Agnes offered a wan smile. "Welcome to Blackwood Manor, Liam. We appreciate you taking on this task." Her voice was soft, almost a whisper, with a tremor that belied her age. Arthur cleared his throat. Come in, No sense standing in the doorway. He gestured Liam inside with a sweep of his arm, then closed the heavy door with a resounding thud. The house was even more impressive inside. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. The furniture was antique, covered in ornate fabrics that looked strangely new. It was as if the house was waiting, holding its breath. "We'll give you a tour," Arthur said, his voice softening slightly. "Show you around. Agnes put a pitcher of iced tea and some cookies in the kitchen for you." The tour was meticulous. Arthur led the way, pointing out the library with its towering shelves filled with leather-bound books, the formal dining room with its long, polished table set for a feast that never came, and the music room with its grand piano gleaming under a layer of protective wax. Agnes trailed behind, adding small details, snippets of family history, her voice tinged with a melancholic pride. "This portrait," she said, pausing before a large painting of a stern-looking man in a military uniform, "is my great-grandfather, General Silas Blackwood. He built this house." Liam noticed that all the portraits seemed to share a similar expression, a kind of grim determination, as if they were guarding a secret. The Blackwoods showed Liam every room except one. As they approached the end of the long hallway on the second floor, Arthur stopped abruptly. "This," he said, his voice suddenly hard, "is the master bedroom." He didn't open the door. He didn't even look at it. Agnes shifted uncomfortably. "It's been locked for many years," she murmured, her eyes downcast. Arthur turned to Liam, his gaze intense. "I want you to understand this, Liam, clearly. You are welcome to use any room in this house, any room at all, but never sleep in the master bedroom, never even enter it if you can help it." Liam frowned. "Is there something wrong with it?" Arthur's jaw tightened. "Let's just say it's not a pleasant room. It holds bad memories. Understand?" Liam nodded slowly, his curiosity piqued. "Understood." Arthur seemed to relax slightly. "Good. Now, let's get you settled. The guest room at the end of the hall has a comfortable bed and a nice view. And remember what I said, Liam, about the master bedroom. It's very important." They finished the tour in silence, a palpable tension hanging in the air. After showing Liam to the guest room, Arthur clapped him on the shoulder, his grip surprisingly strong. "We'll be going now. We'll be back in a month to check on things. You have our number if you need anything." Agnes offered Liam a small, sad smile. "Be careful, dear." Then they were gone, leaving Liam alone in the vast, silent house. The Blackwoods' warning echoed in his mind. What was so terrible about the master bedroom? Why was it locked away, frozen in time? He walked back to the forbidden door, his hand hovering over the cold, ornate handle. He resisted the urge, for now, but he knew, deep down, that his curiosity would eventually win. He could feel it, a growing unease settling in his stomach, mixed with a thrill of forbidden knowledge. Blackwood Manor had secrets, and he was determined to uncover them. Exploring the silent house. The initial days at Blackwood Manor unfolded in a muted, almost ethereal haze. Liam felt like an interloper, a trespasser in a domain where time had long stood still. Sunlight lanced through soaring windows, spotlighting drifting dust motes, each a miniature monument to bygone eras. The library beckoned first. There the atmosphere was heavy with the aroma of antiquity. Paper and leather blended in a fragrant, time-worn brew. Books stood ranked upon ranked, their spines faded inscriptions hinting at forgotten knowledge. A finger traced a shelf, liberating a small cloud of particulate history. He selected a volume at random, a collection of verse steeped in Gothic gloom, its pages as delicate as dried leaves. The ornate script proved too challenging. He replaced the book with a newfound respect for these silent keepers of untold tales. A grand terrestrial globe occupied one corner, its painted continents flaking and worn. Nearby, a brass telescope stared upwards, as if in perpetual search of celestial secrets. Venturing next into the bedrooms, each presented a vignette of interrupted lives. In one chamber, an unfinished tapestry lay dormant on its loom, the needle poised mid-stitch. In another, a smoking jacket rested on a chair, a pipe nestled in an ashtray on the nearby table, the faint ghost of tobacco lingering still. Opening a dressing table drawer revealed a collection of silken scarves, their hues stubbornly vibrant despite decades of repose. Though each space whispered stories, a coherent narrative remained elusive. The house's profound silence began to weigh on him. A turn of the radio knob in the drawing room produced only static, amplifying his sense of isolation. Attempts to reach friends proved futile. The phone line lay dead, and his cell phone offered no connection to the outside world. Utterly marooned. Dinner, prepared in the echoing vastness of the kitchen, was a lonely affair. Each clatter of cutlery reverberated through the empty rooms as he sat alone at the expansive mahogany table, feeling diminished by its scale and the weight of the manor's past. Sleep that night came uneasily in one of the guest bedrooms, plagued by strange, fragmented dreams, unfamiliar faces, and inaudible whispers. He awoke repeatedly, his pulse racing, each time convinced of noises below. A tense journey to the landing offered only silence in reply. The master bedroom, however, remained a constant, locked enigma. He found himself drawn to it again and again, his gaze fixed on the ornate brass knob. Despite Arthur and Agnes's clear instructions, the room's hidden nature exerted a magnetic pull. Another touch of the handle confirmed its stubborn resistance. The following evening, he was once more before the master bedroom door. This time, a set of lockpicks, purchased online years ago and long forgotten, lay ready in his pocket. A mere peek, he told himself, a harmless act of curiosity. The lock proved more challenging than anticipated, but finally, with a subtle click, it yielded. Heart hammering, he eased the door open. Opulence radiated from the room. A 4-poster bed dominated the space, cloaked in heavy velvet, the air thick with dust and an underlying metallic tang. A quick look around, that was all. His fingers grazed the velvet drapes, finding them strangely cold, almost clammy. A small, antique music box sat on the bedside table. He wound the key, unleashing a tinkling melody, haunting and melancholic. Time seemed to dissolve as he investigated the room. Before he knew it, the music box's song faded to silence. Boots discarded, he climbed into the 4-poster bed, pulling the heavy curtains shut, intending only to rest for a moment. He awoke to absolute blackness, the air frigid and still. With no recollection of drifting off, he knew he'd been asleep for a significant time. Reaching out to draw back the drapes, his hand encountered something chillingly smooth. He fumbled for his phone, its flashlight beam revealing a grotesque surprise. He was no longer in the master bedroom. Instead, he occupied a dilapidated nursery, and the object clutched in his hand was a child's porcelain doll, its painted eyes seemingly tracking his every move in the dark. Panic seized him. He threw himself from the bed, pulse thundering. Where had he been transported? How did he arrive here? There was no memory of leaving the master bedroom, only the fading strains of the music box, and then oblivion. Stumbling toward the door, his outstretched hand sought the handle. It yielded with a turn, and the door swung open, revealing not the expected hallway, but the master bedroom itself. The four-poster bed stood draped in velvet, the music box resting silently on the bedside table. He was back where he began, yet the journey remained a blank. The forbidden room. Liam confronted the master bedroom door. Its slick, dark surface mirrored the hallway's gloom. The very name whispered of rigid protocols and a disquieting history. He raked a hand through his already tangled hair, recalling the prior hours spent picking its lock, a foolhardy act now regretted. The nursery's image, the doll, the unsettling disorientation, resurrected a wave of nausea. Yet here he stood. He glanced back. Down the corridor, shadows seemed to writhe, mimicking tormented souls. Utterly alone in this funereal house, silence clamped down, save for the frantic drumming in his chest. "Idiot," he breathed, the words strangely amplified by the stillness. He should retreat, find the relative haven of the guest room downstairs. He should barricade himself in, perhaps even flee Blackwood Manor altogether. But the promised payment tugged at him. He desperately needed this job. And besides, it was just a space, wasn't it? Granted, a large, opulent, forbidden one, but still merely a room. He was succumbing to imagination, fueled by spectral tales and a runaway sense of dread. He reached, his fingers betraying a slight tremor, and pressed down the handle. The door swung inward with a muted, almost seductive sigh. As he remembered, the room was immense, lavish, and icily frigid. Moonlight poured through towering windows, igniting the airborne dust motes like miniature phantom dancers. The four-poster dominated the space, swathed in heavy velvet drapes that swallowed all sound. He crossed the threshold, his footfalls muted by the deep pile carpet. He strode to the windows, drawing back the fabric to invite more light. The grounds unspooled before him, a somber, silent vista of trees and looming darkness. He battled the sensation of unseen eyes upon him. Turning back, he tried to anchor himself in reality. He needed to normalize this. He gravitated to the massive wardrobe, its mirrored doors reflecting his own wan, apprehensive features. He swung it open to find emptiness, save for a faint blend of lavender and something metallic and vaguely disturbing. Extracting his small bag, he unpacked his few possessions, arranging them in a dresser drawer. He changed into his pajamas, feeling absurdly out of place amidst such grandeur. He climbed into the bed, sinking into the yielding mattress. The sheets were cool and crisp against his skin. He drew the heavy covers to his chin, trying to quell the unease churning in his gut. He gazed up at the ornate ceiling, tracing the elaborate designs with his eyes. "It's just a room," he insisted silently. "An exceptionally fancy, exceptionally creepy room. Still, only a room." He closed his eyes, willing himself to unwind. He concentrated on his breath, slowing his racing pulse. Sleep was essential. Getting through this night was essential. The money was essential. He drifted off, the image of the porcelain doll lingering at the edge of his awareness. As unconsciousness enveloped him, he faintly registered a floorboard's soft complaint, a sound that seemed to emanate from the very heart of the walls. Nightmare in the master bedroom. Sleep descended rapidly, a leaden cloak pulled tight after a day of disquieting episodes. But slumber offered no solace, more akin to a plunge into an icy abyss that stole the very air from his lungs. He found himself in Blackwood Manor's gardens, yet transformed from the untended wilderness witnessed earlier. Now, they were a spectacle of cultivation, a riot of color where roses bled carmine onto jade lawns. The air vibrated with the drone of unseen insects, a piercing whine that set his teeth on edge. A figure waited at the garden's terminus, cloaked in deep shadow, and beckoned with a languid wave that sent a tremor through Liam. Every survival instinct urged him to flee, but his limbs moved on their own accord, dragging him forward. As he drew nearer, the shape coalesced into a woman. Her face, pale as moonlight on snow, was framed by ebony tresses that seemed to coil and writhe with a life of their own. A long white gown draped her form, marred by dark splotches spreading like ink blots on parchment. When their gazes finally met, her eyes revealed bottomless wells of despair, laced with a disturbing hunger. A whisper, both eerily familiar and utterly foreign, insinuated itself into his ear. He's waiting. Who? The question snagged in his throat, emerging as a choked sound. She offered no reply, merely gesturing towards the manor, now towering above, an impossibly vast and ominous presence. Its windows were vacant voids, staring down with soulless intensity. From within arose a sound, a child's delighted giggle, abruptly truncated by a scream that clawed at the soul. Then a torrent of images assaulted his mind. A rocking horse bucking wildly in a darkened room, a blood-soaked hand reaching from beneath a floorboard, a spectral visage mocking him from a mirror's depths. Each vision seared itself onto his consciousness, leaving an acrid residue of stark terror. The whispers intensified, a maelstrom of voices swirling around him, saturated with malice. They spoke of treachery, of secrets entombed within Blackwood's ancient stones, of a debt demanding recompense. The words remained elusive, yet their intent was clear, to shatter him, to utterly consume him. He sought to scream, to resist, but found himself locked within this nightmare, paralyzed by its chilling authenticity. The woman extended a hand, her touch a glacial caress, and as her fingers brushed his cheek, her features twisted into a grotesque parody of rage. Liam gasped, jolting upright in the cavernous four-poster. His heart thrashed against his ribs, a desperate rhythm in the stifling atmosphere of the master bedroom. Cold sweat glued his hair to his brow, and his hands trembled with a life of their own. The room lay in darkness, save for the moon's silver streams through the windows, which painted elongated, distorted phantoms upon the walls. Every groan of the house, each rustle of the outside world, echoed like a sibilant threat. He lingered there, struggling for composure, attempting to rationalize it as mere bad dream. But the woman's visage remained burned into his mind, as did the icy whispers and the suffocating weight of dread. All felt too substantial, too real to simply disregard. He examined his hands, turning them over and over. Were they trembling a moment before, or do they continue to tremble now? He couldn't tell. A persistent chill lingered on his cheek, as if her icy touch had left its mark. He had to escape this room. He had to flee this house, immediately. Yet, a morbid fascination held him fast. He knew, with grim certainty, that the nightmare was far from over. It was merely the prelude, whispers and shadows. Liam felt a chill crawl up his spine despite the desert heat radiating through the thick stone walls of Blackwood Manor. He was in the library, trying to lose himself in a dusty volume of Poe, but the words swam before his eyes. He couldn't shake the image of the woman from the garden, her mournful face, the chilling pronouncement of a malevolent presence. He sighed, placing the book on the mahogany table. He distinctly remembered leaving it on the shelf, alphabetized by author. He was certain he had a system, a small attempt to impose order on the unsettling chaos of the house. Now it was splayed open, spine cracked on the table. He stared at it, a knot forming in his stomach. It was a minor thing, utterly insignificant, yet it felt wrong. He pushed the unease aside, attributing it to fatigue. He hadn't slept well since that first night in the master bedroom. The dreams were too vivid, too real. He rose and headed toward the grand hallway, intending to make himself a strong cup of coffee. As he passed a large, ornate mirror, he caught a glimpse of something flicker in its depths. It was gone in an instant, a flash of movement, a dark shape lurking behind his reflection. He stopped, heart pounding, and stared intently at the mirror. It showed only his own face, pale and drawn, staring back. He blinked, rubbed his eyes, looked again. Nothing, just him. He shook his head, dismissing it as a trick of the light, a figment of his overwrought imagination. Still, the image clung to the edges of his vision, a phantom limb of fear. The coffee did little to soothe his nerves. He wandered back into the main hall, the silence pressing in on him. It wasn't just quiet, it was a thick, heavy silence, the kind that muffled sounds instead of simply lacking them. He ran a hand along the cool marble of a nearby statue, a Grecian figure draped in flowing robes. He could have sworn the statue was facing the other direction earlier. He quickly dismissed that thought as ridiculous. He was starting to lose it. He decided to check the security system. It was an old model, installed decades ago, but still functional. He punched in the code and scrolled through the cameras. Everything seemed normal. The gates were secure, the grounds were empty, the interior cameras showed only the undisturbed rooms. Yet, as he watched the monitor displaying the master bedroom, a prickling sensation crawled across the back of his neck. He couldn't explain it, but something felt off. He switched off the monitor and wandered into the music room. As he sat down at the dusty grand piano, he noticed the sheet music was no longer the classical composition he had left open. A new piece sat on the stand, a disturbing melody that seemed to writhe under his gaze. It was titled Lullaby in a spidery, unfamiliar script. He slammed the cover of the piano shut. Later that evening, as dusk bled into night, Liam found himself increasingly on edge. He sat in the living room, trying to read, but the words blurred into meaningless shapes. A low creaking sound, like the house settling, echoed through the room. He ignored it, telling himself it was just the old house groaning. Then he heard it. A whisper. It was faint, barely audible, like the rustling of silk or the breath of a ghost. It seemed to come from the walls themselves, a sibilant murmur that tickled his ears. He strained to hear, his heart hammering against his ribs. Leave. The whisper was gone as quickly as it came. He held his breath, listening intently. Nothing, just the oppressive silence. He told himself he imagined it, that the isolation was getting to him. He got up and began to pace, the floorboards protesting with each step. The whispers returned, fainter than before, but undeniably there. Get out. He stopped, his blood running cold. He wasn't imagining it. He could feel the words vibrating in the air around him, clinging to him like cobwebs. He backed away, his eyes darting around the room. Shadows danced in the corners, twisting familiar shapes into monstrous forms. He wanted to scream, to run, but he was frozen in place, paralyzed by fear. He stumbled back into the hallway and leaned against the wall, struggling to catch his breath. The whispers intensified, swirling around him like a vortex. He's watching. Liam clamped his hands over his ears, trying to block out the sound, but it was no use. The whispers were inside his head now, a chorus of disembodied voices echoing through his mind. He closed his eyes, willing it all to stop, praying for it to be a dream. But when he opened them, he was back in the master bedroom, lying in the enormous four-poster bed. The room was freezing, the air thick with a sense of dread. He had no memory of coming here. The last thing he remembered was standing in the hallway, listening to the whispers. He sat up, his heart pounding. How did he get here? Was he sleepwalking? Or was something else at play, something far more sinister? He looked down at his hands, trembling. He felt wrong, disconnected, like a puppet being controlled by unseen strings. The Blackwood history. The library was a squat brick building in the center of Oakhaven, a town that seemed stuck in a sepia-toned photograph. Liam parked his beat-up Civic, the only modern car on the street, and headed inside, the bell above the door jingling a welcome. Dust motes danced in the shafts of sunlight filtering through the tall windows, illuminating rows of silent bookshelves. Behind the large oak circulation desk, a woman with kind eyes and a warm smile looked up. "Can I help you find something?" she asked. Her name tag read Sarah Jenkins. Liam hesitated, suddenly feeling foolish. Yeah, I'm looking for information about the Blackwood family." Sarah's eyebrows rose a fraction. "Blackwood, you say? That's quite a name around here. What exactly are you looking for?" "Anything, really. I'm doing some research on the Blackwood Manor. I'm staying there for a bit." A spark of curiosity lit her eyes. "Oh, you're the caretaker. I've always wondered about that place. It's been empty for ages. The Blackwood history is complicated. Let me see what I can dig up." She led him to a back room filled with towering stacks of old newspapers and town records. The air smelled of aged paper and forgotten stories. "We have a pretty extensive local history archive here. Let's start with the newspaper clippings." For the next hour, Sarah patiently helped Liam sift through brittle, yellowed pages. They found mentions of the Blackwood family spanning decades, announcements of births, society events, and business dealings. The Blackwoods had been prominent members of the community, involved in everything from the local bank to the town's founding. Then Liam found it, a small, faded article tucked away in the corner of a page. The headline read, "Tragedy at Blackwood Manor, Young Girl Dies." His heart pounded as he read the short, grim report. Emily Blackwood, the 7-year-old daughter of Arthur and Eleanor Blackwood, had died in what was described as a tragic accident at the manor. The details were vague, mentioning only a fall and a head injury. "Oh, that's awful," Sarah whispered, peering over his shoulder. "I've heard whispers about this, but I never knew the details." Liam scanned the article again, his mind reeling. A tragic accident? Or something more sinister? The vagueness of the report felt deliberate, as if someone had tried to bury the truth. He noticed another smaller article beside it titled, "Blackwood Manor Closed Indefinitely. The manor shut down soon after Emily's death." "Do you have anything else about this Emily Blackwood?" Liam asked, his voice tight. Sarah frowned, tapping her chin. "I seem to remember seeing something about the inquest. Let me check." She disappeared into the stacks, returning a few minutes later with a thick file. "Here it is, the official inquest report into Emily Blackwood's death." Liam opened the file with trembling hands. The report contained witness statements, medical examiner's findings, and the final verdict. As he read, a chilling picture began to emerge. The witness statements were contradictory, filled with inconsistencies and half-truths. The medical examiner's report was inconclusive, citing the head injury but raising questions about other, unexplained marks on the girl's body. The final verdict was accidental death, but Liam couldn't shake the feeling that something was being concealed. The unanswered questions hung in the air like a shroud, filling him with a sense of dread. He looked up at Sarah, his face pale. This isn't just a tragic accident. Something happened to that little girl, and I think it has something to do with what's happening at the manor now. The sealed nursery. The librarian's pronouncement resonated within Liam. Emily spent most of her time in the nursery. A nursery? Where? His initial sweep of Blackwood Manor had revealed no overt sign of it. The mansion sprawled, a warren of passages and forlorn chambers. He began his search on the second story, meticulously examining each room. Most proved to be guest quarters, their furnishings veiled in white linen, bearing a faint scent of moth repellent and age. He unearthed a sewing room, its walls displaying a spectrum of thread spools, their colors bleached by time, alongside a compact study crammed with leather-bound tomes. Still, no nursery. Disappointment tightened its grip. Descending to the ground floor, his footfalls echoed across the polished marble. He recalled a corridor he'd neglected, tucked away behind the imposing staircase. A heavy stillness permeated the air, making it feel far removed from the lively parts of the house. He traversed the passage, his fingers gliding along the cold plaster. He passed a bolted wine cellar and a storeroom overflowing with antiquated gardening implements. Finally, at the corridor's terminus, he discovered it, a door, time-worn and scarred, devoid of a handle. Only a keyhole remained, clogged with grime. This had to be it. Liam dashed back to the kitchen, ransacking drawers, until he located an assortment of old screwdrivers. He returned to the enigmatic portal, his pulse quickening with anticipation. He jammed the stoutest screwdriver into the space between the door and the frame and commenced prying. The timber creaked in anguish, fragmenting under the stress. Nearly an hour elapsed, his hands growing tender and sore, but at last, with a decisive crack, the door yielded. He recoiled, catching his breath, and peered into the gloom. A stale draught wafted over him, laced with the fragrance of desiccated blooms and something else, something elusive, yet deeply melancholic. He groped for his phone, activated the flashlight, and directed its beam into the space, a nursery. Ephemeral particles danced within the cone of light, revealing a space arrested in time. A rocking horse occupied one corner, its painted gaze fixed blankly ahead. A dilapidated dollhouse, its roof collapsed, rested on a small table. Along the walls, shelves sagged under the weight of threadbare books and time-worn plush bears. Liam crossed the threshold, his shoes disturbing the thick layer of dust blanketing the floor. He ran his hand along the rocking horse's mane, feeling the coarse, fragile strands. A wave of intense sorrow engulfed him, a sensation so acute it threatened to bring tears. He ventured deeper into the room, his flashlight illuminating forgotten relics. In the room's core stood a small wooden cradle, its mattress stained and tattered. He reached out, gently setting it in motion, the cradle responding with a soft groan. Retrieving a teddy bear from the shelf, its fur matted and its button eyes lost to time, it felt strangely weighty in his palm. As he clutched it, a shiver snaked down his spine. An unsettling conviction washed over him. He was being scrutinized. He pivoted slowly, sweeping the beam of his flashlight across the room. Nothing, only the dusty playthings and the lingering atmosphere of desolation. He spotted a diminutive wooden chest tucked away in the corner. Kneeling, he unlatched it. Within, he found a collection of children's drawings. Their colors faded, yet their images still discernible. There were depictions of flowers, of fauna, of a dwelling, Blackwood Manor. He lifted one drawing in particular. It portrayed a young girl standing before the manor, her face a scrawl of indistinct lines. Above her, a somber cloud hovered, shaped like a reaching claw. A sudden rush of wind rattled the window panes, causing Liam to startle. He whirled around, his heart hammering in his chest. The room seemed to have chilled, the shadows deepening. Replacing the drawing in the chest, he shut the lid and stood. He had to escape. The room's oppressive misery was suffocating. He retreated slowly, his eyes darting around the room. As he neared the doorway, he thought he perceived a fleeting motion in his peripheral vision, a momentary disruption in the shadows. He trained his flashlight into the corner, but it revealed nothing. Only the rocking horse, its painted eyes still staring vacantly ahead. He spun and bolted from the nursery, slamming the portal behind him. He didn't cease running until he attained the comparatively safe haven of the kitchen, his lungs burning. He braced himself against the counter, striving to subdue his racing pulse. What was so unsettling about that room? Why did it feel so tainted? One thing was certain. Whatever fate befell Emily Blackwood, its roots lay within that nursery, and he was resolved to unearth the truth. The vanished house sitter. The nursery's frigid air followed Liam like a ghostly appendage as he rushed to his car. Answers were paramount, and he knew their source. He practically flew back towards Oakhaven, the ghastly rocking horse seared into his memory. Sunlight streamed through the library's towering windows, illuminating drifting dust motes in the otherwise silent space. Sarah glanced up from behind a mountain of books, her expression welcoming, yet questioning. "Liam, back already?" she inquired, a slight crease forming on her brow. "Blackwood Manor prove interesting?" He cut to the chase. "The nursery. Something's off. Emily Blackwood, the little girl. What actually happened?" Sarah's smile vanished, replaced by a guarded look. "The Blackwoods. Their story is tragic. Emily was their only child. She succumbed to a childhood illness, a grievous loss for them." Liam sensed more beneath the surface. "There's more, isn't there?" "You're holding something back." She exhaled, tucking a wayward lock of hair behind her ear. There were rumors, of course, the hushed whispers of a small town. Some claimed it wasn't merely an illness. Some whispered. The house claimed her. Liam dismissed it. The house? Absurd. Yet even voicing the denial, a shiver traced its path down his spine. Sarah's gaze intensified. "Before you, Mr. O'Connell, there was another, a caretaker, a house-sitter hired by the estate's lawyers, a young man, presumably drawn by the money, just like yourself." Liam was riveted. "What happened to him?" Sarah paused, her voice barely audible. "He disappeared, vanished without a trace. His car remained in the drive, keys in the ignition, never seen again." A palpable weight settled in the library, making it hard to breathe. A creeping dread coiled around Liam's insides, a constricting band of ice. "Vanished," he croaked, his voice rough. "The police investigated thoroughly," Sarah continued, her eyes fixed on some distant point, "but uncovered nothing. No sign of struggle, no indication of his whereabouts. It was as though he simply ceased to exist." Liam shot to his feet, the chair scraping loudly against the floor. I have to leave," he stuttered, his thoughts scrambling. He needed distance from the library, from Oakhaven, from Blackwood Manor itself. "Liam, are you all right?" Concern laced Sarah's tone. He mumbled something about needing to check on the house, then hurried out the door, leaving her to watch him go, worry etched on her face. The drive back to Blackwood Manor passed in a daze, the setting sun elongated shadows, contorting them into monstrous shapes that danced around him. The manor loomed against the twilight, a menacing silhouette against the fading light. Its windows were like empty sockets, glaring down, judging. He hesitated, his hand still on the keys. He should just leave, pack what few belongings he had, and run far away. Forget the paycheck, forget Blackwood Manor, forget Emily Blackwood and the missing caretaker. But the weight of his student loans resurfaced, the desperation that had led him here in the first place. Flight was an unaffordable luxury. He killed the engine and emerged from the car, the crunch of gravel underfoot like the tolling of a funereal bell. The front door seemed impossibly distant. Summoning his resolve, he forced himself forward, each step measured and heavy. His trembling fingers fumbled with the keys. Finally, he gained entry, stepping back into the oppressive silence of the house, a silence that felt like a crushing weight. He could hear his own pulse hammering in his ears, his heart a frantic drum. Foregoing the tour of the house, he retreated directly to his allocated room, ignoring the master bedroom, ignoring the sibilant whispers that seemed to seep from the aged walls. He bolted the door, reinforcing it with a chair, and dove beneath the covers. Shivering, he lay there, listening, waiting for the inevitable, waiting for the house to claim him as it had Emily Blackwood, as it had the previous caretaker. Sleep was a distant prospect. He thrashed and turned, haunted by nightmarish visions, derelict toys, vacant rocking chairs, and spectral figures. Exhaustion eventually prevailed, pulling him into a restless slumber. He awoke with a start, disoriented and lost. The room lay in darkness, but he could discern the vague shapes of furniture. Pushing himself up, his heart raced as he looked around. Something was terribly, fundamentally wrong. This was not his room. He was in the master bedroom, trapped by the storm. Liam ransacked the wardrobe, tossing clothes into his duffel with reckless abandon. Folding was a forgotten art. Sanity, too, seemed to be slipping his grasp, judging by the frantic pace of his escape. The master bedroom radiated an unnerving chill, the oppressive silence a tangible weight against his skull. He swiped Emily Blackwood's photo from the nightstand, inverting it. He couldn't bear to look at her, at anything that tied him to this damnable house. His phone displayed the same infuriating message. No signal. Blackwood Manor, a digital void, a prison built of isolation. The duffel's strap bit into his shoulder, a painful reminder of his mounting desperation. He had to get out. No sum of money could compensate for the creeping unease, that suffocating feeling of being observed, manipulated like a pawn. The grandfather clock in the hall tolled downstairs, the sound reverberating through the otherwise vacant expanse. He ignored it, single-minded in his pursuit of freedom. He snatched the keys from their hook and bolted outside. Usually, the desert air hung still and parched, but now it felt heavy, charged with an unnatural calm. The sun hid dimly behind a jaundiced sky, and grit coated his tongue. He unlocked his beat-up Toyota and slid behind the wheel, stabbing the ignition. The engine cranked, coughed, then surrendered to silence. "Damn it!" he hissed, twisting the key again. The same lifeless response. A third attempt, coaxing it with the gas pedal, yielded nothing but the hollow echo of failure. Frustration exploded, and he slammed a fist against the wheel. Then he saw it, a ravenous wall of sand. An opaque, swirling beast devoured the horizon. It advanced with alarming speed, far quicker than seemed plausible. The wind intensified, howling around the vehicle, rattling its frame. He could hear the deep-throated growl of the approaching storm, a primal sound that resonated deep within his marrow. Another futile turn of the key. Still nothing. Panic seized him, constricting his throat. He couldn't remain. He wrestled with the door, forcing it open against the mounting gale. Sand assaulted his face, blinding him, and he stumbled out, his arm shielding his eyes. Swirling grit choked the air, making each breath a struggle. He could barely make out the Manor's silhouette, a brooding, menacing shadow against the sickly yellow sky. Running proved impossible. The wind hammered at him, driving him back toward the car. He fought against it, his lungs burning, eyes streaming. He had to reach the house again. It offered the only refuge. He staggered back, the duffel bag slamming against his spine. The front door crashed shut just as he arrived, nearly severing his fingers. He fumbled desperately with the keys, his shaking hands betraying him. Finally the lock clicked, and he plunged inside, slamming the door against the onslaught. The sudden quiet was jarring, almost deafening. He leaned against the solid wood, gasping for air, his heart a frantic drum. Sand infiltrated the sanctuary, seeping through the cracks and forming miniature dunes on the polished floor. He was marooned. He scanned the opulent hallway, the portrait seeming to observe him with silent, knowing amusement. The grandfather clock chimed once more, its mournful tone amplified in the emptiness. He was alone, utterly alone, with the tempest raging outside and something far more sinister festering within these walls. A bone-deep chill, born not of the desert night, but of the chilling realization that he was no longer in charge, gripped him. He was a marionette, dancing to a silent melody on a stage he failed to recognize, and the performance had barely begun. The hidden room. The gale roared, a banshee wail mirroring the despair clawing at Liam's insides. Imprisoned. He was well and truly snared. He retreated to the library, the one sanctuary in this oppressive house, a place of quiet, if dusty, solace. Books stood shoulder to shoulder along the walls, their gilded titles whispering of faraway lands and lives untouched by his current predicament. He trailed a finger across their aged spines, the leather brittle and unforgiving. Hours he'd spent charting escape routes in his mind, only to meet dead ends. Outside, the tempest raged on. The car remained a stubborn monument to immobility, and the house felt like a malevolent observer. Nearing a particular shelf, something snagged his attention. Not a volume nor its placement, but the shelf itself, crooked somehow. Or was it a trick of the light, highlighting a suspicious join? He paused, scrutinizing the anomaly. The shelf groaned beneath the weight of legal tomes and aged historical records. He nudged it, expecting unyielding resistance. Instead, it yielded fractionally. A thrill shot through him. He explored the edge, searching for a release, a telltale mechanism. Finding nothing, he applied more force, pushing, pulling. The shelf remained stubbornly fixed, save for that subtle give. Just as frustration began to set in, his fingers stumbled upon a barely discernible depression, cleverly disguised as a wood knot. He pressed. A faint click echoed in the stillness. The bookshelf shuddered, then pivoted inward with agonizing slowness, revealing a narrow, lightless aperture. Dust motes pirouetted in the sudden sunbeam, illuminating a secret sealed for years. Liam's breath hitched, his pulse drumming a frantic rhythm against his ribs. This had to be it. The key to unlocking Emily's fate, the explanation for his captivity. Grabbing a flashlight from a nearby table, he plunged into the hidden space. A musty odor, the aroma of decay and neglect, permeated the air. The chamber was cramped, scarcely larger than a walk-in closet, with bare stone walls and a low-slung ceiling. At its center sat a solitary wooden desk, buried beneath a chaotic accumulation of papers. A cobweb-swathed lamp dangled precariously above, offering only meager, flickering illumination. Liam approached the desk cautiously, his flashlight beam dancing across the scattered documents. Letters, deeds, photographs, each coated in a thick layer of undisturbed grime. He seized a letter, his fingers trembling as he swiped away the residue of time. The postmark indicated it was written only weeks after Emily's passing. Addressed to an attorney, the hand was undeniably Eleanor Blackwood's, Emily's mother. He devoured the words, a knot forming in his stomach. The circumstances surrounding Emily's demise were regrettable. As agreed, the preservation of our family's standing remains paramount. The established narrative must hold. Any queries, all doubts must be suppressed. I trust you grasp the severity of the matter and the discretion required. The letter fell from Liam's grasp as though electrified. He snatched at another document, a notarized statement declaring Emily's death a tragic accident, the result of a fall from her horse. He unearthed more letters, more legal pronouncements, each brick in the same carefully constructed wall of deceit. The Blackwood family hadn't simply mourned Emily, they'd actively buried the truth. He caught up a photograph. Emily stared back at him, captured shortly before she died. She smiled, radiant, yet a subtle shadow lingered in her eyes, a fleeting expression of fear, a hint of melancholy that undermined her cheerful facade. He turned it over. Scrawled on the back in faded ink was a single word: lies. A wave of chilling apprehension crashed over him. The answer was here, entombed in this clandestine room, beneath a mountain of falsehoods. But what was the unvarnished truth? And why had the Blackwood family gone to such lengths to conceal it? Gathering the incriminating documents, his mind a whirlwind of possibilities. He knew he had to escape. He had to expose their web of lies. But as he swung around to leave the hideaway, the bookshelf slammed shut with a deafening crash, engulfing him in impenetrable darkness. Frantically, he groped for his flashlight, his breath seizing in his throat. He was trapped. Again. Drawn back. Liam lurched awake, heart hammering a frantic rhythm against his ribs. Ordinary sunlight, filtering through the grimy slats of his blinds, was a welcome balm. The prosaic blend of day-old coffee and bargain detergent stung his nostrils, a far cry from the sickly sweet and metallic stench that had saturated Blackwood Manor. He was home, supposedly safe. He raked a trembling hand through his damp hair. The memory played on repeat. The frigid flagstones, the suffocating dark room, the dreadful truth of Emily Blackwood's demise. He'd wrenched the ancient bookcase free, sending aged volumes tumbling, and fled into the main hall. A desperate, blind scramble ensued, down echoing corridors until he burst from the front doors into the nascent dawn. He hadn't paused until he'd reached his car, hadn't ceased driving until the city's grit and noise enveloped him once more, a world away from Gothic horror. He dedicated the subsequent weeks to obliterating Blackwood Manor from his consciousness. Immersing himself in his studies, he miraculously aced exams he'd anticipated bombing. Extra barista shifts became routine, the fragrant aroma of roasting Arabica, a tenuous shield against the phantom miasmas that clung to his senses. There was even Sarah, a vibrant art student whose easy laughter and endless discussions of glazing techniques offered a temporary distraction, all for naught. Blackwood Manor remained, an embedded thorn, suppurating just below the surface of his thoughts. Textbooks became screens for projecting the manor's intricate wallpaper patterns. The espresso machine's whirring transformed into spectral whispers in the floorboards. Sarah's gaiety dissolved into echoes of Emily Blackwood's desperate entreaties. Finances undeniably played a role. His meager savings dwindled daily, a constant indictment of the fortune abandoned within that dilapidated pile. Yet it transcended mere monetary concerns. Unanswered questions clawed at him. The injustice of Emily's fate gnawed at his conscience. The oppressive sensation of having been so tantalizingly close to the truth, only to be driven into headlong retreat, haunted him. He reasoned with himself, attempting to seal the past. He should be thankful to be alive, free from the Manor's grasp. Emily Blackwood was gone, beyond his reach, and he was a fool to imperil himself for a ghost. But the justifications rang false, flimsy barricades against a growing obsession. He was plagued by dreams of the hidden room, the incriminating documents detailing the Blackwood family's malevolence. Emily's features swam in the dim light of his apartment, her eyes beseeching, demanding retribution. One bracing autumn afternoon, Liam discovered himself behind the wheel of his battered car, pointed northward. The decision hadn't been deliberate, the act of a conscious mind. No bag packed, no explanation offered to Sarah. He was simply on the road, the scenery blurring into an impressionistic smear, the setting sun daubing the heavens with shades of blood orange and violet. As he approached the familiar junction, a tremor coursed through him. The atmosphere thickened, grew leaden, the joyous autumnal palette leaching into muted grays and browns. A chance to turn back remained. Sanity, even life, could still be salvaged. He didn't. His grip tightened on the steering wheel, knuckles bone white. He swung onto the sinuous lane that led to Blackwood Manor, the naked branches of the trees reaching like skeletal fingers. The house awaited, a silent malignancy, he could feel it, drawing him inexorably closer. He parked at the base of the long neglected driveway, the manor looming above, a dark and vigilant sentry. The windows were vacant, dark sockets staring into the encroaching twilight. He killed the engine. Silence descended, profound and absolute, broken only by the susurrus of leaves. He emerged from the car, his limbs feeling like leaden weights. Each step carried him deeper into the manor's suffocating presence. He knew this was ill-advised, a blunder of epic proportions. He was powerless to resist. Blackwood Manor held him captive. Its hooks were embedded in his very soul, and it had no intention of releasing him. The truth, he understood with a shuddering certainty, demanded its pound of flesh.